What if the world you see every day is not the real one? What if there was a single word, a vibration so ancient and pure, it could dissolve the invisible chains that keep humanity asleep, and that word was erased from memory by those who rule this false reality? Imagine that a sound, just a sound, could make the archons, the cosmic jailers described in ancient Gnostic texts, lose their grip over the human soul. Why then was it forbiddance? Who decided that you should never hear it again? For thousands of years, humanity has prayed, sung, and repeated countless sacred names. But somewhere, hidden behind layers of dogma and translation, there was a name so powerful that it could awaken what the Gnostics called the divine spark, the fragment of the true God buried inside every human being. And when a soul remembers that spark, it stops feeding the archons, those entities that survive on ignorance, fear, and submission. That's why, according to ancient Gnostic writings, the word was silenced, rewritten, and finally forgotten. Today, you will uncover what that forbiddance word truly meant. You will understand why it was erased from sacred language, how it was replaced by distorted symbols, and what happens when a soul dares to pronounce it again, not with the mouth, but with the heart that has awakened. Stay until the end, because the revelation you're about to hear may change how you see every prayer, every word, every vibration you speak. If you are someone who seeks the truth behind the veil, who feels that religion has only told part of the story, I invite you to subscribe and join this community of seekers. Every week, we reveal hidden knowledge that was buried for centuries, not to rebel against faith, but to remember the truth that was once ours. Shall we begin uncovering the word that terrified the archons? To understand why a single word could threaten the dominion of the archons, we must first recall how Gnostic teachings described creation itself. The ancient texts, such as the Apocryphon of John, tell that the true source, the ineffable, boundless light, emanated countless divine beings. Among them was Sophia, whose desire to know the invisible God brought forth an incomplete creation. From that imperfect act emerged the demiurge, the false god who declared himself the only one. He built the material universe as a copy of the divine realms, and through him came the archons, the rulers of illusion. They shaped matter, language, and even the thoughts of humanity to keep souls confined within their labyrinth. The archons understood something crucial. Words shape reality. Every word carries vibration, and vibration is the architecture of creation itself. The ancients said that before light, there was the word, the logos, but the Gnostics saw a deeper layer. They claimed that not all words awaken light. Some bind consciousness deeper into illusion. Over millennia, the sacred languages were altered. The original vibrations, the ones that resonated with the true source, were replaced by hollow syllables, symbols that lost their power. What we call prayer became repetition. What we call worship became programming. In hidden sects scattered across Egypt, Syria, and the deserts of Judea, small circles of initiates preserved fragments of a different speech, a language of light. It was said that among those sacred tones existed one sound above all others, a word so pure that when pronounced in full consciousness, it pierced through the fabric of the demiurge's illusion, making the soul remember its celestial origin. The Gnostics whispered that this word could not be written, only felt, and that it was the bridge between the human voice and the divine silence. The priests of power could not allow that, because if people remembered how to speak directly to the source, they would no longer need temples, rituals, or intermediaries. The archons fed on dependence and fear, and this word dissolved both. So they ensured that every mention of it disappeared, replaced by substitutes, censored texts, or labeled as heresy. Some believe it was hidden beneath layers of translation in scriptures. Others think it was encoded in chants that lost their true tone. And that's where the mystery deepens. What kind of word could challenge cosmic powers? What could a human possibly say that would cause the rulers of illusion to tremble? Tell me in the comments, do you believe that language itself can be a form of imprisonment or liberation? The first traces of this mystery appear not in grand temples or royal inscriptions, but in fragments, papyrus torn by time, scattered across the sands of Egypt. Among them, the Gospel of Truth, attributed to the Valentinian Gnostics, speaks of a name that heals ignorance, a vibration that the Father uttered before the world came to be. It says that whoever remembers that name receives knowledge of themselves and of the source. What is striking is that this name is not described as a word of power like those of magic traditions, but as a resonance, an echo of the divine remembering itself through the human soul. When you read these texts, you can feel the tension. They hint at something that cannot be pronounced with the tongue, only with inner awareness. It was the sound of awakening, the true Logos, the living word that precedes all speech. Later mystics described it as the lost word of creation. In Gnostic circles, this was the secret of salvation, that by invoking the inner name, the soul becomes untouchable to the Archons. For them, the human being was not a sinner needing redemption, but a spark of light trapped in a cosmic labyrinth, deceived by false gods who claimed dominion over matter. The forbidden word was the key to remembering that imprisonment is an illusion. It reconnected the fragment to the whole, the breath of the soul to the breath of the true God. In the trimorphic Protanoia, one of the most enigmatic texts of Nag Hammadi, a voice declares, "I am the voice of the thought that dwells in light." It's as if the divine itself speaks through human consciousness, a reminder that the true word is within, not outside. But when that teaching spread, it became a threat. As Christianity institutionalized, the concept of the Logos was reinterpreted. The word became a person, not a vibration. The Church Fathers translated the mystery into doctrine, removing its inner dimension and transforming revelation into hierarchy. The inner resonance that could awaken souls became a name to worship externally. What was once an experience turned into a belief. And from that moment on, the true word was forgotten, buried beneath centuries of ritual and fear. Some scholars believe this suppression was not accidental. By converting the mystical vibration into external worship, the Archons ensured that humanity would continue to seek God outside of itself, never realizing that the word was still echoing within every breath, every heartbeat. When the last of the Gnostic teachers were silenced, the echoes faded, but the memory lingered, carried secretly through mystical traditions that dared to remember. Imagine this for a moment. If the word is vibration, then it is not bound by any human language. It is the same frequency that moves stars and awakens souls. It cannot be owned or named. And perhaps this is why it had to be forgotten, because to speak it consciously is to become free. Do you feel that sometimes a single sound, a chant, or even silence itself can shift your inner state, as if something ancient were answering from within? If so, perhaps you have already heard a faint memory of that lost word. When we examine how languages evolved, a strange pattern emerges. As civilization's centralized power, sacred speech became ritualized, codified, and restricted. In ancient Egypt, only the priests of high rank could speak the original Hekau, the words of creation. In Mesopotamia, the divine names were written but never read aloud by common people. And later, when monotheism consolidated its influence, the idea of the Word made flesh replaced the understanding of the Word as vibration. The living connection between sound and divinity was severed. What remained were words of obedience, prayers taught by institutions, not revelations born from the soul. The Gnostics believed this was no coincidence. They taught that the Archons, those invisible rulers of the lower heavens, worked through systems of authority, not only political or religious, but linguistic. By controlling words, they controlled thought. By deciding which names were sacred and which were forbidden, they redirected spiritual energy toward the false god, the demiurge. That's why every genuine awakening was called heresy, because the one who remembers the true word stops feeding the machinery of illusion. Throughout history, traces of this manipulation appear disguised as linguistic reforms, translations, or even sacred prohibitions. When the ancient texts were transcribed into Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, entire meanings shifted. The ineffable name of God, once a symbol of inner experience, became a label to worship externally. For example, in the Hebrew tradition, the Tetragrammaton was considered too holy to pronounce. But to the Gnostics, the danger was not in pronouncing it, but in believing that the sound itself could replace the inner knowing it once represented. The sacred was not in the syllables, but in the consciousness that remembered its origin while speaking them. As centuries passed, new words were introduced to inspire submission: sin, obedience, fear. Words that once symbolized expansion became tools of control. Even the language of heaven and hell, reward and punishment, was reshaped to align the human psyche with guilt rather than awakening. Yet in the margins, mystics from every path, Sufi poets, Christian hermits, Hindu sages, and Jewish Kabbalists continued whispering of a sound beyond language, the unspoken word, the Nam, the Shabd, the Logos, different names for the same vibration. Each tradition carried fragments, like broken mirrors reflecting one hidden truth. The divine frequency could still be found within. The Archon's greatest victory was convincing humanity that salvation required intermediaries, priests, temples, structures, that only through sanctioned words could one reach the divine. But the Gnostics countered this illusion, saying that every soul has direct access to the source through gnosis, through remembrance. The forbidden word was not lost. It was silenced inside us. Close your eyes for a moment and think, when you pray, do you speak out of fear or remembrance? Do your words come from the lips or from the light within? This distinction, though invisible, defines whether we are feeding the system or dissolving it. The Archons cannot understand the language of awakened souls, because it is not made of words. It is made of vibration, of silence that knows itself. And that silence, paradoxically, is the first key to rediscovering the forbidden word. In the next block, we will explore what the Gnostics truly meant by speaking in light, and how this knowledge might awaken again in you. The Gnostics said that every soul carries within itself the memory of its origin, a divine vibration, faint yet eternal. When the Archons created the world of illusion, they built it from false reflections of that vibration, weaving a tapestry of languages, beliefs, and symbols that would keep the soul occupied, confused, and fragmented. They feared one thing above all, that humanity might rediscover the sound that connects consciousness directly to the source. In their scriptures, this was called the word of light, not a name spoken by the tongue, but a resonance that awakens when the soul remembers what it truly is. If you look closely at the ancient texts, you'll see the same mystery appearing again and again under different names. The Egyptians called it Hu, the primal utterance through which the universe was sung into being. In India, it became the Om, the sacred syllable that vibrates through all creation. In the hidden Gospels of the early Christians, this vibration was described not as a spoken phrase, but as the sound of the Spirit moving over the waters before time began. All of these traditions pointed to the same truth, that creation itself is an echo of divine sound, and when the human soul vibrates in harmony with that original tone, illusion collapses. This was the forbidden's revelation. The word that could break the Archon's control was not a secret name you could learn, memorize, or recite. It was remembrance. The vibration awakened when the human heart aligned with truth, silence, and light. The moment you feel unity rather than separation, the false world loses its grip. You stop speaking the language of the Archons, the language of fear, judgment, and guilt, and begin to speak the silent word of the source. Love that needs no approval, light that asks for no permission to shine. The church, misunderstanding or fearing this teaching, transformed it into something external. The Word of God became text, commandment, doctrine, something you read, not something you are. But to the Gnostics, the Logos was never ink on a page. It was the living current of awareness. They believed that when a person becomes still enough, they can hear that current, like a subtle hum beneath all thought, the same vibration that once sang galaxies into existence. To awaken to that sound is to remember where you came from. Now imagine what that means in human terms. Every time you speak in anger, the vibration of your words feeds the lower realms. But when you speak in truth, forgiveness, or wonder, you realign with the divine frequency. That is why Gnostics taught that speech should be sacred, that even silence could become prayer if held in awareness. The forbidden word was never lost because it was never external. It sleeps in every heartbeat, waiting for a soul to remember. And when one does, the Archons lose their power over that being, for the prison of illusion cannot hold a consciousness that vibrates in harmony with the real. Some scholars suggest that this secret survived through esoteric chants and mantras. The Cathars of medieval Europe, the Sufi mystics of Persia, and even early Christian monks practiced forms of vocal gnosis. The repetition of tones meant not to praise a god, but to awaken the inner resonance of divinity. The system called these heresies, yet their songs were whispers of the same truth, that salvation is not begged for, but remembered. So perhaps the forbidden word is not one syllable, but a state of being, a soundless word, spoken through every act of awareness, every breath taken in love. When the Gnostics said that this world was a dream woven by false powers, they also said that the way out is simple. Wake up by remembering the sound of your own soul. And that raises the question I'll leave hanging in your mind. If you were to hear the vibration of your true self, the echo of your origin, would you recognize it? Or would you fear it because it does not belong to this world? In the next block, we will connect this ancient revelation to modern times, and you will see how the same forces that silenced the forbiddens, words centuries ago, still shape your thoughts, speech, and even your reality today. If you think the ancient archons disappeared with the fallen empires, think again. Their presence has only changed form. In Gnostic cosmology, the archons are not merely entities from another realm. They are patterns, forces that repeat themselves through systems, ideologies, and even human thought. They operate wherever consciousness is asleep. And today, their influence flows not through temples or altars, but through the screens we hold in our hands, the words we read, the voices we listen to. The prison of the archons has become digital, cultural, and linguistic. Look carefully at the world around you. Every day, billions of words are spoken, typed, and broadcasted. Yet how many of those words awaken truth? Most of them feed division, fear, consumption, or illusion. The archons no longer need to forbid a sacred word. They only need to flood the world with meaningless ones. The sacred vibration that once connected human speech to divine intention has been drowned in noise. The more we talk, the less we say. The more we communicate, the less we connect. The Gnostics warned about this. That language, once detached from inner awareness, becomes a tool of hypnosis. Consider how every institution teaches you what to call things, labeling experiences, emotions, and even people. The moment a word defines something, it also limits it. When you say enemy, you forget the shared essence. When you say impossible, you close the door that consciousness could have opened. This is how the archons operate, not by open tyranny, but by defining your world through language. They shape perception by shaping vocabulary. And when perception is trapped, freedom becomes unthinkable. The forbidden word, the vibration of remembrance, is the antidote. It's the state of awareness that precedes all definitions. Before thought names an experience, there is pure being. That is the domain the archons cannot reach. That is the space where gnosis happens. Ancient mystics entered this space through silence, through chanting, through meditative prayer, any method that dissolved the noise of ordinary speech. In that inner stillness, they said, the forgotten word resounds naturally, as if the soul were remembering its original song. If we translate that into modern life, it means recovering presence in a world built on distraction. Every advertisement, every political slogan, every social media feed is designed to keep the mind reacting, to replace awareness with endless commentary. The archons thrive in reaction. But when you become still, when you speak consciously, when you choose words that heal instead of divide, you are no longer feeding them. You are speaking the forbidden's word, not as a mystical syllable, but as a living vibration of awareness. This is why in every age, those who rediscovered this truth were seen as dangerous. From the Cathars burned in Languedoc, to the Sufi poets accused of blasphemy, to the hermits who retreated into silence, all shared one secret, that divine knowledge is direct, unmediated, and alive in every being. You don't need permission to remember your source. You don't need an authority to speak to the light. You only need to awaken the word within yourself, the sound that breaks illusion, because it comes from beyond it. Imagine if humanity began to speak differently, words born not from fear, but from understanding. Imagine if conversations carried vibration instead of judgment, if silence was no longer empty but sacred. That alone would collapse the entire architecture of control. Because when a person speaks from truth, systems built on deception cannot endure. The Gnostics were right. The word is creation. Every time we speak unconsciously, we create prisons. But every time we speak with awareness, we recreate Eden. So yes, the Archons are still here, not as demons in the sky, but as patterns in the mind. Yet they are powerless against remembrance. Their illusion requires your belief to exist. The moment you stop speaking their language, their world begins to dissolve. This is the beginning of liberation, not rebellion, but remembering. And so, perhaps, the forbidden's word that broke the Archon's control is not something to be found in ancient scrolls, but something to be heard within yourself, in that eternal instant where silence meets awareness. In that space, words end, but meaning begins. Stay with me, because in the next block, we'll approach the climax of this revelation, how the human voice, the breath itself, can become the bridge between the false world of the Archons and the divine realm of light. Imagine just for a moment that the sound you call breath is not merely air, but the memory of creation itself moving through you. Every inhale, every exhale is the echo of that first divine vibration that called existence into being. The Gnostics believed this was not metaphor, but literal spiritual physics. The same current that gave life to the cosmos flows through the human voice. To speak is to shape reality. To breathe consciously is to touch the edge of eternity. The Archons knew this, and that is why they worked tirelessly to make humanity forget the sacred use of the breath and the Yah, word. Because the moment a soul remembers that its voice carries divine resonance, illusion begins to crumble. In the Pistis Sophia, one of the most mysterious Gnostic texts, Sophia cries out to the light from within the chaos. Her cries are not words of desperation. They are tones, vibrations that ascend through layers of darkness. Each utterance pierces the veils of the Archons until she finally reaches the divine realm. The text does not say she was rescued. It says she remembered herself. That is the hidden key. The power was never external. The forbidden's word that breaks the Archon's control is not a secret formula whispered by masters. It is the act of remembrance itself. When consciousness vibrates in harmony with truth, it no longer serves the false rulers of this world. Take a deep breath and feel what happens when you silence your thoughts. There is a subtle pulse beneath everything, a hum that cannot be described. That is the word. It is not spoken, yet it speaks through all things. The sound of wind moving through trees, the rhythm of waves, the beating of your heart, all of it is the same vibration, the eternal syllable that has no beginning or end. When you become aware of that hum, when you listen instead of merely hearing, you begin to remember that you are not part of the illusion. You are the light observing it. The ancient initiates practiced something they called the return through sound. They would chant in darkness, allowing the vibration to dissolve identity until only awareness remained. It was not about producing a sound, but about becoming the sound. They described it as being spoken by the light. And perhaps this is what the Archons feared the most, not rebellion, not anger, but awakening. Because when the soul speaks from the light, the rulers of the lower worlds cannot hear it. Their frequencies do not align. The soul becomes invisible to control, untouchable by manipulation. And so, my friend, the revelation is not that there is one forbidden word, but that every word spoken from awakened consciousness becomes forbidden to the system of illusion. Each time you choose truth over deceit, compassion over control, silence over noise, you are uttering that same ancient word. It may not sound like anything special, but to the Archons, it is unbearable, for it vibrates with freedom. The world around you may not change instantly, but within you, a new universe begins to form. Ask yourself, what language do you speak when you think, when you feel, when you pray? Are your words born from fear or from remembrance? Because the vibration you emit shapes the reality you live in. The Archons control through repetition, repeating lies until they sound like truth. But awakening happens through recognition, realizing that you are never bound. Let this moment be your turning point. Don't seek the word as sound. Seek it as state. The sacred vibration is not taught, but rediscovered when you become fully present. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and for a second, feel the pulse that unites everything that exists. That is the word, the forgotten bridge between the Creator and the created. And in that moment of remembrance, you are free. So, if you have felt something stirring inside you while listening to this, something ancient and wordless, know that it is not imagination. It is your own divine memory awakening. The Archon's greatest lie was that humanity is powerless. But the truth is that the forbidden word never left you. It has been waiting, silently, for you to speak it again through the way you live, love, and awaken. Now, as we move into the final block, we'll bring this revelation together, and you'll understand how remembering the word is not the end of the path, but the beginning of a greater journey of light. You've come this far, and perhaps something within you feels strangely familiar, as if you've been here before. That feeling is not coincidence. It is recognition. Deep inside, beyond your name, beyond the layers of thought and memory, something ancient has been waiting for this moment, waiting for you to remember that the divine voice has always spoken through you. The forbidden word was never erased from existence. It was hidden in the most secure place of all, your own consciousness. The Gnostics understood this long before psychology, before philosophy, before religion as we know it. They said that the Demiurge and his Archons could manipulate everything external, words, laws, faiths, even holy books, but they could not touch the inner light, and the way back to that light was through remembrance. The word is not sound, it is knowing. It is when your heart, your breath, and your awareness align with the eternal pulse of creation. In that state, even silence becomes sacred speech. When you speak from truth, you speak the word. When you forgive, you speak it. When you refuse to repeat hatred, when you create instead of destroy, when you love without condition, you pronounce it again. That vibration is unbearable to the Archons, because it does not belong to their world of duality and fear. It belongs to the realm of light, to the true source that has no name, no beginning, and no end. And so, the real revelation is this: you do not need to find the forbidden word. You only need to stop forgetting it. Every act of awareness is a syllable in that eternal language. Every conscious breath reawakens the sound that once shattered the illusion of separation. The Gnostics did not preserve these teachings to make you believe in hidden gods or ancient myths. They preserved them so that when the time came, when the noise of the world became unbearable, a few souls would remember that freedom begins in the heart that listens. Now you understand why this word was buried, distorted, and silenced for centuries. Because if humanity remembered it, no power could enslave the spirit again. The Archons would fade, not through war or rebellion, but through disuse, because they survive only in the minds of the asleep. Once the soul awakens, they lose their substance, like shadows vanishing at sunrise. And the dawn, my friend, begins within you. If what you've heard today stirred something inside you, a quiet sense of remembrance, a sudden stillness, a spark of recognition, do not let it fade. Keep it alive. Speak with awareness. Listen between the words. And join this circle of seekers who, like you, are reclaiming what was once stolen. The right to know, to remember, to awaken. By commenting, liking, and subscribing, you don't just support a channel. You help keep alive a current of knowledge that was almost extinguished. You become part of a lineage that refuses to forget. And now, as we close, I will leave you with questions, not to end the journey, but to open the next gate. What happens when humanity rediscovers the creative power of its own voice? What new world could emerge if every soul remembered the sound of its divine origin? And most of all, when you finally hear the word again, not in your ears, but in your heart, will you have the courage to speak it through the way you live? The search does not end here. The real work begins the moment the video ends, in your silence, in your breath, and in the vibration that never stopped calling you home.